through the day, turning heavy at times, particularly across Wales into the Midlands, northwest England too. Elsewhere, we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. And the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, we could see highs around 24 or 25 Celsius. Elsewhere, generally the high teens to low 20s. That area of rain across North Wales, northern England, continues to push further north as we head through the evening, and then further spells of rain push into southern parts of the UK as we move into the early hours. This could be heavy at times, so overnight a lot of cloud around outbreaks of rain, and that will keep temperatures up generally a little higher, 14 to 17 degrees across much of the country. So it means a cloudy, wet start for many Tuesday morning, heavy showers already, but it should brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon, but that will trigger a few heavy showers too. Over the next few days, it remains unsettled as that low pressure stays in charge. Further showers and longer spells of rain and temperatures around average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, good afternoon. Welcome to GB News Sunday. It is 1 p.m. I am Emily Carver. We have got a rip-roarer of a show for you this lunchtime. Coming up this hour, BBC in crisis. Claims a well-known presenter, a household name no less, has been paying a teenager for explicit pictures. That's dominating the headlines. Culture Secretary Lucy Fraser will hold urgent talks with the BBC today. Then Sleepy Joe heads to the UK. The US President will meet the King and the Prime Minister tomorrow, but after a series of snubs, I'm asking, does Biden hate Britain? And Just Stop Oil are back at it again. This time they crashed a former Chancellor's wedding. But has Just Stop Oil actually managed to make people feel sorry for George Osborne? Please do get in touch on all of those topics and more. Send them through gbviews@gbnews.com or tweet me at gbnews. But before we get into all of that, it's the news headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Emily. The BBC's Director General will speak to the Culture Secretary this afternoon about claims a presenter paid a teenager for explicit images. Describing the allegations as deeply concerning, senior government officials told the broadcaster they must be investigated urgently and sensitively. It's after the young person's mother told the Sun she saw a photo of the man in his underwear on her child's phone. Former Conservative Party leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says the case has not been handled properly by the BBC.
I don't quite know what they're doing. It's in a mess, clearly. If you read the newspaper reports, you can see that the BBC has tried to play this down from the beginning, and it's not worked because it's exploded. They don't have any plan. Any inquiries that are taking place seem to be a mess, and that's led to a whole series of reputational damage across the newspapers to the BBC. The BBC should act like everybody else does, immediately suspend somebody pending the investigation,
Yes.
And that way it's clear, and then they can get on with it. At this stage, try and do it quietly and behind the scenes. It never works because somebody's blown the gaff and they're in trouble over it.
More than 1,000 people have crossed the Channel on small boats over the past 2 days. The Home Office says over 600 people were intercepted on Friday and almost 400 made the journey yesterday. Well, despite storm warnings, conditions are calm, and GB News understands that more than 200 people have already been intercepted just this morning. It brings this year's total to 12,700. The Home Office says the number of people risking their lives is unacceptable. Britain is preparing to host the US President, who's due to arrive this evening. Joe Biden will meet the King at Windsor Castle tomorrow. Then he'll hold talks with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, where he is expected to raise concerns about Brexit. America's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine could also be discussed. Well, Joe Biden's visit comes ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania, where the Prime Minister will urge allies to bolster their defence spending. Speaking in Vilnius on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak is expected to say that we're seeing unprecedented security challenges. The UK remains one of the few NATO members meeting the alliance's requirement to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. More than 700 firearms have been seized in the UK by the National Crime Agency. Forces have been working with police in Spain to stop guns, which can easily be converted from entering the UK. In 11 cases, firearms were sent to people with mental health issues, and 7 involved people with extremist views. The NCA says 74 people have been arrested, resulting in 50 convictions over the past 5 years. The Chancellor is set to outline so-called evolutionary pension reforms to boost economic growth. Jeremy Hunt plans to make changes to pension funds, encouraging investors to support fast-growing businesses. Well, in a speech tomorrow, he's expected to say the changes will be gradual, not drastic. The government says the aim is to help savers, pension schemes and the UK. Concerns have been raised about the thousands of displaced Ukrainians who are still in temporary accommodation in Scotland. The Liberal Democrats say more than 3,000 Ukrainians are still in hotels and around 700 are on board the MS Victoria cruise ship. The party says progress has been slow and it criticised the lack of resources. The government says it's working on longer-term housing. And the Met Office is warning of more heavy showers and thunderstorms. It's after rain and storms disrupted major sporting events like Wimbledon and the Ashes yesterday. The Met Office is predicting prolonged heavy rain in Scotland, while Northern Ireland will face strong winds, hail and even potential flooding. Heavy showers are also expected to hit Wales, the Midlands and southwest England. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Emily.
Thank you, Rory. Yes, so urgent talks are to take place today between the Culture Secretary and the BBC Director General. That's as the ongoing scandal threatens to consume the corporation. This comes after revelations an unnamed star, a household name at the corporation, has been taken off air following allegations they paid a teenager for sexually explicit pictures. Just to be very clear, these are only allegations at this time. But GB News political reporter Olivia Utley joins me now. Olivia, these are extremely shocking allegations, if true. Can you bring us the very latest?
Hugely shocking allegations, yes. What happened essentially was that a mother of a teenage child went to the BBC and complained that she had seen on her son or daughter's computer a conversation between this person and a household name BBC star. And she, the mother, asked the BBC to investigate thoroughly and speak to the presenter involved about it. Well, she didn't really hear anything else. And the next night, she saw that presenter on air again. Now, that was back in May, and that is part of the problem. We are now 2 months on. The mother felt that nothing was being done about it. And so in frustration, she went to the Sun newspaper and told her whole story. She did not get paid by the Sun newspaper to tell her story. And what she says is that the only reason she's coming out now and explaining this is that she wants this person to be off air. She says that it's ruined her child's life, that it's been funding his or her crack cocaine addiction, and it's taken away their innocence, the innocence of their child. So it's a really terrible story for the BBC. Awful human element as well. And now, today, it feels as though the spotlight is very much on the BBC itself. Now, it's emerged that these allegations came out 2 months ago. Nothing seems to have been done. The Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, is going to be speaking to Tim Davie, the director of the BBC, later on today. And this morning, we've had politicians from all parties, really, laying into the BBC's handling of the process. We've had Priti Patel, the former Home Secretary and a darling of the Tory right, saying that the BBC has become a nameless and faceless organisation and that broadcasting gods are able to pretty much get away with anything. I'm paraphrasing, but that was the gist of what she was saying. We've had Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, saying that the presenter should be taken off air while this investigation is being held. And of course now Lucy Frazer, representing the government, is meeting with Tim Davie. So I think over the next few days we can expect the story to develop. You will remember how long the Philip Schofield story was making front page news for. And I think now what we're seeing is a turn away from not just criticism of the presenter himself, who of course might have been involved in some sort of illegal action as well. That's going to be investigated thoroughly later on. We don't know if that's the case. But also how the BBC's processes work. Is it right that a taxpayer-funded organisation can sort of keep something this quiet, keep something this big under wraps for so long? And that's what I think we'll be hearing more of in the next few days.
Yes, Olivia, just very quickly, I don't know if you've seen the front page of the Sunday Mirror, but they are reporting that the BBC host in question partied with bosses at an awards do after these sex allegations were made against him. So the BBC may well be opening itself up to the accusation that there was protection of this talent going on.
Well, absolutely. What the BBC is essentially saying at the moment is that it will investigate anything, any new information that comes forward. It admits it heard the complaint, but it says there wasn't enough information to follow it through. Now, it says it will investigate further information in whatever way it comes to light. So through the Sun newspaper, it will investigate. But as you say, right now, the organisation has really opened itself up to a lot of criticism, that in the time between the middle of May, when that mother came forward, investigated, and now very little seems to have been done. And it's possible that, as you say, BBC chiefs were actually entertaining this presenter, and they were definitely keeping him on air.
Thank you very much, Olivia. Olivia there outside the BBC, our GB News political reporter there, giving us the very latest on this BBC scandal. Now, a BBC spokesperson did say on Friday, we treat any allegations very seriously and we have processes in place to proactively deal with them. As part of that, if we receive information that requires further investigation or examination, we will take steps to do this. That includes actively attempting to speak to those who have contacted us in order to seek further detail and understanding of the situation. If we get no reply to our attempts or receive no further contact, that can limit our ability to progress things, but it does not mean our inquiries stop. If at any point new information comes to light or is provided, including via newspapers, this will be acted upon appropriately in line with internal processes. Well, there we go. That was quite a long statement, quite a detailed statement there from the BBC. They are saying that they will be investigating this fully and cooperating as they should. So let's see what my panel make of this. I am joined by Peter Whittle, Director of the New Culture Forum, and I also have Stephen Pound, former Labour MP, with me this afternoon. Well, Stephen, you heard what Olivia had to say there. She brought us the very latest on this scandal that is engulfing the BBC. Now, there is a debate to be had over whether this person, this presenter, this household name should now be named.
Well, there's a couple of things about this. Firstly, that apology from the BBC was a cut-and-paste job. We used to do the same thing in the Whip's office, all the same. We take these things very seriously. We will, of course, be investigating. But, you know, cut and paste. They need to, I think the BBC is now in the position where, and I think Olivia is absolutely right to point this up, we're talking about criminality. We're talking about grooming. We're talking about an adult in a position of authority and power influencing another person without even, you know, going into the details of the drugs and everything like that. But I'm just wondering, is there a time when a certain organisation becomes so huge, so bloated, so out of touch with its original founding purposes? And the NHS is probably an example of that, where people start to believe their own myth. If you look, you know, the Thames Water, you know, there's so many companies, organisations and structures which have outgrown their original assumption, and they are now almost they believe they can do no wrong. And I think this will fuel the anti-BBC feed. The BBC is not the only player on the pitch nowadays. I mean, I'm looking at you. I mean, there's
very much not.
Well, no, but, you know, there was a time, you know, in my day, when I was your age, it was the BBC. You know, we didn't even have ATV or ITV. But so now they're not the only players. So the old argument about being we are the national broadcaster. And I think, firstly, there'll be a fury against the BBC in Parliament. Secondly, I think we're going to end up possibly with the PSB, a public sector broadcasting system, as you have in America, which is a perfectly good television programme, but you subscribe to it, you choose to listen to it, you choose to pay for it.
It's very interesting that you say that, because that would be quite an unpopular view in the current Labour Party, I would imagine.
Don't you believe
like
it, Emma?
seek to protect the BBC at all costs. Peter, do you think Stephen makes a good point there about what this says about the BBC and other publicly owned organisations?
Oh, definitely. I think the whole BBC licence should be scrapped.
Well, there you go.
There's no question about that. With this particular case, and obviously, as you say, there are allegations, Emily, I think the only thing that the BBC could possibly do is to come clean quite quickly. I mean, all of this kind of, is it 2 months, I think Olivia said, that this has been kind of going on internally? It should basically, look, we should learn from past mistakes, really quite big mistakes, actually, and simply come out and basically say, look, this is the situation and we are handling it. But all this cloak and dagger stuff, I mean, it's just, it will, as Stephen said, absolutely give ammunition to people who have got it in for the BBC. Anyway.
People like you, Peter.
Oh, yes. I mean, I tell you, not for this reason.
No, not for this reason, but
different reasons we've discussed on the show many times.
But it adds to the idea of these people thinking perhaps that they are too big for their boots, perhaps.
Yes, exactly.
But it's worth reminding our viewers what exactly has been alleged. A male presenter allegedly began paying a teenager when they were 17, he or she, sent them money which they used to fund an addiction to crack cocaine. That is the allegation. That is a hugely shocking allegation. Now, Stephen, to refer to the presenter, there have, unfortunately, been presenters, well-known male presenters, who have had to come out publicly and say, it wasn't me. So this is added pressure.
Yeah. What's it Raylan say? You know, get out of my mouth. You know,
Yes.
it ain't me, babe. But you know, I remember going to the BBC a couple of years ago in Great Portland Street. They had Rod Stewart was performing there, and I thought I'd have some of that. And as I went up the stairs there, you could see these spots on the wall where the paint was a different colour, where they had to take down all the pictures of all these BBC. Obviously, this was post Yew Tree Savile and everything like that. And I think there was, I can't remember. I think Tony Blackburn was the only person who was left up there. And we're getting to that sort of situation now. But look, what's really horrific about this is not just, you haven't mentioned the money. I think it was about £35,000 they're talking about. That is awful. That is grooming. That is using a position of power, using a position of authority. And it sounds to me as though it could have wrecked a young life. But the real horror, the real shock here is the BBC knew about this. And they've entertained this person, you know, at a warm white wine party.
But then is there a line to be drawn? Because these are just allegations, innocent until proven guilty, Peter.
Yes. Well, unfortunately, we don't live in that kind of environment anymore. I mean, I think that...
Do you say that because we have social media where anyone is allowed to make an accusation against anyone?
Exactly. This is terrible, terrible development that's happened. However, that's quite separate to what we're talking about. I think, as I said, I think the BBC should just simply, you know, act very, very quickly, not wait for any more long kind of internal investigations. I think the point as well is that, as you said earlier, that in fact the BBC and other institutions, they do live in a kind of atmosphere where basically they do feel sort of untouchable. Remember, the kind of people that they mix with all the time, the people who work at the BBC, are people just like them. You know, and you know, the big nasty tabloid press is out there and not to be taken seriously. So I think that that's what they should do, because can you think about it? You know, this is on the Sunday, right? This is going to dominate now, isn't it?
Absolutely, yes.
And weeks until someone's named.
When you talk about anti-BBC bias, I'm in the position of the broken-hearted ex-boyfriend on this particular... I love the BBC. I thought the BBC was marvellous. When you could watch cricket on the BBC, you know, when it was actually authoritative and it was, you know, entertaining, educating and informing, you know, the old Reithian motto. It was marvellous. And I'm broken-hearted. I feel that my love has gone off with the milkman. I mean, it's shocking.
I'm sure you're the one who broke the heart, Steve.
I think that basically, yes, the BBC is not what it once was. I do think that, you know, when you have to weigh it up, which I've done, you sort of think, well, we got the proms, and we got this and that.
Haven't got the cricket.
And then you sort of think, wait a minute, for me, the cultural damage they do now supersedes any benefit that they once had.
Well, I'd be interested to know what our viewers and listeners think about that one. Does this add to anti-BBC sentiment? Would you like to see the BBC got rid of, or at least the licence fee? Let us know. You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Still ahead, should we commission a new royal yacht? Michael Gove thinks so, but do you agree? Is it a waste of money, or is it something that we should be proud of? But first, let's take a look at the weather with Greg.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, further showers and longer spells of rain over the next few days. There will be some sunshine though, but for many of us it will feel fresher. And the reason for this is this area of low pressure. It's been around over the last few days, just sat to the west of us, but over the coming few days, it actually spreads towards us and increases the risk of showers and longer spells of rain even more. This evening, we do have thundery showers across the UK, but they will start to fade away. And then most places overnight, we'll see clear skies, though towards the early hours, we could see some showers moving back into southwestern parts of the UK. Temperatures generally the low to mid-teens, so a little fresher than recent nights, but still quite warm for the time of year. Monday morning gets off to a dry start for many, plenty of sunny spells, though the cloud quickly thickens from the southwest. This area of rain pushes north-eastwards through the day, turning heavy at times, particularly across Wales, into the Midlands, northwest England too. Elsewhere, we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. And the best of the sunshine towards the southeast, we could see highs around 24 or 25 Celsius. Elsewhere, generally the high teens to low 20s. That area of rain across North Wales, northern England, continues to push further north as we head through the evening, and then further spells of rain push into southern parts of the UK as we move into the early hours. This could be heavy at times, so overnight a lot of cloud around outbreaks of rain, and that will keep temperatures up generally a little higher, 14 to 17 degrees across much of the country. So it means a cloudy, wet start for many Tuesday morning. Heavy showers already, but it should brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon. But that will trigger a few heavy showers too. Over the next few days, it remains unsettled as that low pressure stays in charge. Further showers and longer spells of rain and temperatures around average.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Greg. So we've got lots more coming up on the show. Sleepy Joe is heading to the UK. Well, hey, but after a series of snubs from the president, I will be asking, does Biden hate Britain? I'm Emily Carver. You're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and radio. Now, just before the break, we were discussing the BBC scandal that is rocking the organisation. You've been getting in touch. Len has written in. He says, the latest fiasco with the BBC management and their presenter is of no surprise. All these hypocrites are the same. Strong stuff, but perhaps echoes a little bit what Stephen Pound was saying earlier about these organisations being a little bit high and mighty. John says, once again, we see how our media play their power game on vulnerable folk. This complaint should have been reported immediately. Yes, the accusation is that it was reported back in May and little has been done so far. Lynn says, amazing this person hasn't been named yet. If it was a Tory MP, it would be splashed all over the papers and on BBC News. That is a very good point, and it does mean that a lot of presenters have had to come out publicly and say, oi, stop, suggesting it was me. It's not, which isn't very fair for them. It's not really a great duty of care either. So please do keep your views coming in on that. Subscribe to our YouTube channel while you're there. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GB News. But moving on to another big story of the day. The White House says President Joe Biden will travel to London this Monday and meet with the King and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak during his visit. But has the trip turned sour already? The President is pushing for EU Chief Ursula von der Leyen to be installed as the next NATO Secretary-General. That's after blocking the UK candidate Ben Wallace. Is this a harmless push for a stronger Europe in defiance of Russia, or another shameless snub by Sleepy Joe? Let me know what you think. But let's see what my panel makes of this. Peter,
yes.
Is it harsh even to ask the question, does Biden hate Britain, or does he a little bit?
Well, he does a good impression of it, or rather, should I say, being dismissive of it. There was that remark, about I'm Irish, for example, when asked by the BBC. I think that the whole attitude to Britain from America seems actually to have changed somewhat. And I think that there's far less sympathy, so much for a special relationship. I mean, I think that exists now purely in British minds. I can't see any real evidence that actually they look upon us in the same way that maybe we look upon them. And I think it's been actually over for quite a long time. I'd say the last time, really, that there was a real sort of strong bond, if you're not counting Blair, was Thatcher and Reagan. But even then, during that so-called special relationship, even during that period, Reagan, was very sort of tentative about helping us out in the Falklands, things like that. So I think that this is very much I think they just don't think about us very much, Emily. That's the point, not hatred.
Do you not think Trump, though, when he came in 2019, I think it was, in the summer, he had a 3-day extravaganza here. There was talk of this big trade deal, which Biden has gone very quiet on indeed.
Yes.
But do you think Trump reinvigorated that relationship somewhat?
I don't think so. I think it was probably just a bit of a one-off fluke. I mean, there he was with the Queen and making a huge fuss about the Queen, quite rightly. But in fact, I think generally speaking, we don't sort of register there in the same way that we think maybe we do. We're just part of this thing called Europe. Look, I'm a huge patriot. I wish I weren't saying that, but I think it is the case.
Peter, I must point out that we've got on the screen, and for those listening on radio, we've got a picture, moving image of Joe Biden with his deck chair, well, moving very slowly, not to be rude, not to be ageist, but he is moving very slowly with his deck chair on the beach. And this was yesterday. He's having a very lovely time, moving very slowly indeed, Stephen. But apparently he falls off his deck chair. So we'll keep an eye on that, Stephen. It is a bit tragic to see Joe Biden come to, get into a few scrapes, doesn't he?
Well, I think this bit about the special relationship, it's very interesting you actually say the Thatcher-Reagan thing. I mean, even at the height of that rapprochement, don't forget, Reagan would go and invade Grenada, not even tell us. Yeah. We had no idea that this was, part of the Commonwealth. And, he didn't give anything for us. I think Lyndon Johnson, you remember when he tried to get Harold Wilson to send troops to Vietnam? And, can you at least let us have some Scotch guards and bagpipes, please? And at the end of it, he said, look, I'm sorry, the special relationship is gone. I think it has. But look, the thing about Biden that's fascinating is that, I spent so much time in Northern Ireland where we worked with Biden, and particularly George Mitchell and other people. I still actually follow Congress and follow the papers. And there's a big headline in the New York Times a couple of months ago. It says, Biden's IRA triumph. And I thought, oh, no. But, of course, it's the Inflation Reduction Act. It was.
The New York Times is worth doing a whole segment on because they've been running piece after piece.
Oh, they hate the British. No, they do hate the British.
Negative about Britain. But the evidence is stacking up, isn't it, Peter? He sent his wife Jill in his place to the King's coronation. Some people saw that as a snub. Of course, the White House say it was no such thing. He openly criticises the British government over Brexit policy, over the Northern Ireland Protocol. He blocked our Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace, from being the NATO Secretary-General in favour of a failed German Defence Minister, now European Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen. he would rather see, by the sounds of it, a very much European, internationalist-focused defence.
Oh, I think that's very evident. I mean, that last bit, definitely. I mean, you know, sending his wife Jill to the coronation, I think, God, I sound like I'm trying to be fair to them. The fact is that British monarchs don't go to American presidents don't go to British.
So you think that's a red herring?
Bit of a red herring. Also, when Charles and Diana got married in 1981, Reagan sent Nancy. He didn't come. So, I mean, I think basically you can read too much into this. Having said that, the royal family has been really important in keeping any kind of relationship going with their soft power. I mean, he's meeting the King in Windsor tomorrow. I live in Windsor, so it'll be hellish down there. You know, but you know, the
Or
Queen,
delightful, depending on your point of view.
the Queen got on very well with the Obamas, for example, but that didn't stop Obama taking out the bust of Winston Churchill from the White House. You know,
I think
So there's always been a bit of a fractured relationship. We'll come back to this.
Yeah.
We must move on. You are watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Please do let me know what you think about Joe Biden. His trip is very much a short trip compared to what Trump had when he came here for a 3-day extravaganza. Has he snubbed us? Does he hate Britain? A little bit. We've got lots more coming up on today's show. Should we commission a new royal yacht? Stephen is very keen to talk about this one. He's told me Michael Gove seems to think we do need one. But would a new national flagship be a boost to national morale or yet another strain on the public purse that we simply cannot afford? But first, let's get the news with Rory.
Thank you very much, Emily. The Culture Secretary says she's been assured by the BBC that allegations against a presenter are being investigated swiftly and sensitively. Lucy Fraser, who spoke to Director General Tim Davie, says the corporation must now be given the space to establish the facts and take appropriate action. A man's been accused of paying a teenager tens of thousands of pounds for explicit images, with the young person's mother telling the Sun she saw a photo of him in his underwear on her child's phone. More than 1,000 people have crossed the Channel on small boats over the past 2 days. The Home Office says over 600 people were intercepted on Friday and almost 400 made the journey yesterday. Well, despite storm warnings, conditions are calm, and GB News understands that more than 200 people have already been intercepted just this morning. It brings this year's total to 12,700. The Home Office says the number of people risking their lives is unacceptable. Britain is preparing to host the US President, who's due to arrive this evening. Joe Biden will meet the King at Windsor Castle tomorrow. He'll then hold talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, where he is expected to raise concerns over Brexit. America's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine could also be discussed. And Joe Biden's visit comes ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania, where the Prime Minister will urge allies to bolster their defence spending. Speaking in Vilnius on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak is expected to say that we're seeing unprecedented security challenges. The UK remains one of the few NATO members meeting the alliance's requirement to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. That's the up-to-date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and radio. So a few of you, well, a lot of you actually, have been getting in touch about the BBC just in general. Of course, we've had allegations against a male presenter at the BBC. We don't know who the presenter is, but people are getting in touch. You're getting in touch just about the BBC in general. David has written in. He says, yes, it's time to abolish the BBC. All that is on are repeats anyway. Well, there's that. And Ronald has got in touch. He says, the BBC went off track when they added persuade to educate, entertain and inform to their mission statement. The solution? Separate BBC News from the entertainment and sport arms and make the news arm a subscription service. I think an increasing number of people would agree with you. And of course, we saw, I think it was Richard Sharp who said that perhaps the rich should pay more for the BBC licence fee. That's his proposal for how to make it sustainable. I'm not sure if that would work. But anyway, we're going to move on to something, well, quite exciting, I think. The Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove has become the latest public figure to back a new royal yacht. Once the budget allows, though. The plans were championed enthusiastically by former Prime Minister Boris Johnson to act as a floating embassy and secure trade deals for Brexit Britain. The former royal yacht was decommissioned by Tony Blair in 1997, boo, and is now one of the UK's top tourist attractions. So I've got my panel with me. Oh no, I'm talking to Grant Harold, who is a former royal butler, who I believe has been on a royal yacht. Grant, thank you very much indeed. Can you explain to our viewers and listeners why a royal yacht is so important?
Do you know, thank you for having me on, Emily. Do you know the thing about royal yachts, they are important. There's actually been 83, and the first one goes back to the time of Charles II when the Dutch gifted a royal yacht, and since then it's become a tradition. And it's been over 25 years since we last had a royal yacht, since Britannia obviously was decommissioned. As you mentioned, you can visit it on Leith. I've been there a few times, even when I worked for the King. I went and visited Britannia. So there's a real history with it. But more importantly, the yacht was used a lot for business. I mean, it did 1 million nautical miles, almost 700 visits, state official visits, being used for state occasions and also for trade and commerce by the government as well as the royal family. So I think people kind of think, oh, a royal yacht's a luxury and something that the royals go around and having lovely holidays on. But the reality is it's a working yacht.
So, Grant, you think we shouldn't be penny pinching when it comes to a royal yacht, that actually it might make back the money that we spend on it?
I think it really will. I think it would do a lot to help the country with our trade, with our commerce, with connections with other countries. You know, it allows our royal family and the government to travel to other parts of the world and be able to use it for entertaining and building business. I mean, it's got a lot of there's a lot of uses for it. And so when people say we're kind of penny pinching or overspending when we don't need to, there's a lot of things, Emily, I think we would agree, that money's spent on that is maddening, where this is something that would put the great back into Great Britain, I believe.
Yes, just lastly, Grant, I think there are some miserable people in this country who don't like to see money go towards projects that are seen as being even, I don't know, a little bit too patriotic. Do you think that's got something to do with it? People don't like putting money towards such projects.
Do you know, Emily?
Oh, he's gone. Grant has finished. He's had enough. But luckily enough, I have my wonderful panel with me to follow up on that conversation with Grant. I don't know what Grant was going to say there, but I think he was making the point that it's worth the cost.
Well, it all depends really what it's going to be for. I mean, we talk about the Royal Yacht Britannia, we mentioned decommissioned in 1997. The only time, apparently, that and I think it's probably true that the Queen really looked upset, on a public occasion, was when she lost the yacht. But that was actually a floating home for the royal family. It did a lot of good. This, from what I can gather, will be, as you say, much more of a general usage. However, the optics don't look great. This is the Levelling Up Secretary talking about a royal yacht, right? And I'm not being cheap here, but people will think, well, wait a minute, why should there be a new royal yacht for the royal family, and this is how it will be portrayed at the very time where apparently we're having a slimmed-down monarchy at the same time. So I think it seems to be very beside the point and slightly old-fashioned as well. The idea
That's interesting you say that, Peter, because you are patriotic.
I'm staunch, yes.
You love your British history.
Yes.
I would say that you do like a bit of pomp and ceremony as well.
Can't get enough.
But you think, actually, the royal yacht may be a step too far at this moment.
I think it's sort of
for the British public.
I think I think it's just it's kind of irrelevant. I mean, look, we're in the 21st century here. the idea that Britain again has a kind of imperial yacht going around the world, basically, you know, trying to get trade deals together, or at least give them stamp of approval or whatever, seems to be a rather old-fashioned way of doing it. Having said that, you know, maybe we just shouldn't have got rid of the original yacht. I
Well,
mean,
there's always that, isn't there?
You know, I mean, why did we do it? That was pure spite, I think.
Possibly. Do you think that was pure spite getting rid of it?
No, I don't think so. I understand why he did it. And
Why did he do it?
Because it was just after we'd won, and he was basically trying to save money wherever he could in 1997. But look, the point is, the Britannia, she's beautiful. She was laid down in...
Was he not making some kind of point?
He didn't need to. He just got 189 majority. You know, he had no need to make particular... But look, one of the things we used to be quite proud of that, she was actually laid down in Clydebank in John Brown's when, you know, the Clyde shipbuilding industry was the best in the world. But the silly thing is, at the moment, British ships, wherever they actually come into port, they will not normally, well, not in every case, but not very often you'll rig a deck awning aft and you'll actually invite local people on. You get a Royal Marine Band tooting away. And we do a lot of that. Now, if you have a Type 23 frigate coming into St John's, Antigua, a British frigate is an industrial warfare piece of equipment. It actually detracts from the value of it. I think the importance is, if we want to fly the flag, and let's not forget, Barbados have left the Commonwealth, other countries are leading the Commonwealth, why don't we actually send this new, glorious, glittering, beautiful, noble, marvellous ship that we're going to build, hopefully, on Clydebank, to actually knit together that great tangled skein of the Commonwealth and bring us all together.
You know, a lot of young people listening to you would just think,
He's mad.
You're stuck in the past, this is nonsense, can't you just have a Zoom call
I'm
to
a young
have your
person,
trade deal?
I think that.
Exactly, you know, Steve. But I do like your sense of purpose and enthusiasm about this royal yacht. And apparently, people at home have equal enthusiasm. Well, at least they have lots to say. Alan has written in. He says, yes, we should have a royal yacht built by apprentices, guided by master craftsmen. Lovely.
Yeah. I would love all of the shipping to return. I mean, as a major industry, you know, I mean, that's what I would like. I think the idea of it is just particularly just seems very strange coming from the levelling.
Although considering the issues we've got in the Channel, of course, it might not be that long before there were calls for it to be used for other purposes.
You are so provocative, honestly.
Oh, come on! Fair enough, we're using barges to house migrants, so you know the royal yacht could be used.
So the RNLI would be out of a job.
Let's see what James has to say, because he's taken the time to write to us. He says, forget the royal yacht. They will just build the most luxurious yacht. Oh God, I'm so predictable, aren't I? There you go. James, that's what he's had to say. And Grover says, why can't we repurpose a confiscated rich Russian mafia yacht for our king? Not a new idea, as we've done it in the past when we formed our navy by nicking French and Spanish ships. Well, there's an idea. Yes, what's happened to all of those Russian yachts that have been, you know, they were all in the Mediterranean and then they got... well, snatched, didn't they?
Well, a couple
of them
got
taken away, confiscated.
Proceeds of crime. I mean, a couple of them have actually been sold.
We don't want a proceeds of crime as our royal yacht, thank you very much. But please do keep your views coming in and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We've got tons of videos there. I think we've got hundreds and hundreds of thousands of subscribers. And also follow us on Twitter. We're at GB News. So, moving on. Is there now any difference between the two major parties on the economy? Labour's front bench doesn't seem to think so. Rachel Reeves has reportedly told colleagues that a Labour government wouldn't raise personal taxes while the cost of living persisted. Keir Starmer has said he does not want to increase income tax for top earners. He'll avoid imposing further taxes. Of course, the tax burden is currently at its highest in the post-war era. It's predicted to reach 38% of GDP by 2027 to 28. And the crucial point is this, that they've also said that they will not be increasing public spending beyond what the Conservatives already have planned, which is quite an admission, isn't it, Stephen? Because people are voting Labour. There are many public sector workers out there, for example, who are hoping that come a Labour government, they will get these big bumper pay packets, aren't they?
Well, this is basically the Gordon Brown, Tony Blair playbook from 1997, when we were terrified. The one thing that terrifies those of us in the Labour Party is the accusation that the Labour Party spends money and the Conservative Party creates money. And therefore, we had to show that we were fiscally responsible. And I think this is a good example. The British economy at the moment is tanking. It is in a terrible state. And the next general election, housing is going to be the huge issue, because housing, mortgages, inflation, that's the big issue. What we have to do is to ensure that we actually have international confidence. The reason why Truss and Kwarteng lost was because of Standards and Poor's and the rating agencies that said, look, I'm sorry, the British economy is in the realm of junk bonds. We've got to show that we have stability, responsibility as an incoming government. Then we can grow the economy. But at the moment, if everybody had pay rises, then that would just stoke inflation. We all know that.
But hang on, I think people want to know what their longer-term vision is.
Grow the economy and
because
widen.
If they're saying, actually, we're not going to spend any more at the moment because we have to be careful, and we're not going to raise your taxes too high, bar a few little tweaks here and there.
Yes.
Well, hang on, you are a left-wing party. What actually are you going to do? And we don't know. Are they going to keep to these sort of fiscal rules for a couple of years and then suddenly slap massive taxes, suddenly open the gates to huge amounts of public spending and cripple us again?
That's not what we did in 97.
No, but it was in
Huge amounts of spending.
Yes,
the
but
welfare state
99, yeah.
grew.
That you were saying there that if you have huge pay rises, that leads to inflation. I mean, that's pure Mrs. Thatcher saying that. I mean, this is the interesting
She
thing.
wasn't wrong all the time.
No,
just most of the time.
OK.
I think it's incorrect, though. I think it's a reaction to inflation that we're getting higher wages.
But it's the consequences of the key issue. I mean, in inflation is too much money chasing too few goods. You know that.
Fundamentally.
I think the fundamental...
We're at
point
LSE. We know these things.
The fundamental point here, really, Emily, is that there is almost no difference between the parties on anything. If I had to sort of say, if you take not just economics, but on these really crucial cultural issues, there's nothing. Immigration, there's nothing between them. If anything, actually, I would say at least Labour is honest, for example, about what it would do on that, on that topic. The Tories will say one thing, but then simply deceive the public and simply do the other. So I think it is called increasingly a uni-party, and I think that there is a very, very good reason for that. There is nothing to choose between these two.
Now, I'm very outspoken about where the Conservatives go wrong, but I do think there is a difference between Labour and Conservative, and I do think it's in those cultural things. I think that if Labour get into power, there will be even more of what I think is toxic identity politics. We already know that the Labour Party is planning a new Race Equality Act. What exactly does that mean? Does that mean discrimination against white people in job applications? Because we've seen that already. What does it actually mean? Does it mean quotas when it comes to hiring?
It's happening in Haringey today.
Well, we're going to be talking about this later.
This huge expanse of you just mentioned identity politics, the huge expanse of these cultural issues. One of the reasons I almost would say why GB News started has all happened under a Conservative government. It's been there for 13 years. I mean, I admire your kind of loyalty in a way, Emily, to them, but there is nothing to choose. And I think the important thing for the next election is going to be this, is that in the past, Tories, they could always say, well, look, whatever you do, don't vote for them, or vote for us because Labour will get in. I think that is not going to wash anymore. I really think that is not going to be a threat that works.
Well, we're going to move on. Let me know at home what you think. Is there a difference between the Labour Party and the Conservative Party? We know that Rachel Reeves threw away her £28 billion a year that she was going to be spending on green policies. That's gone in the bin because they can't afford it. So let me know, do you see a difference on the cultural side, on the economics? I mean, it probably is wafer thin, Rizzler thin. Anyway, now this is a funny one, potentially, depending on what you see, or outrageous. George Osborne has had a week from hell as his and his new wife's big day was disrupted by Just Stop Oil activists showering the newlyweds in orange confetti. Yes, the former Chancellor was the latest victim of the climate group as a female protester fled smiling after being approached by security, and Just Stop Oil retweeted a video of the incident congratulating the couple. So I'm going to go straight to my panel on this one. Peter.
Yeah. Well, I think it's appalling, revolting behaviour, actually. And people say, oh, it's not going to do their cause any good. Well, I don't have much time for their cause anyway. But I think that the way in which the self-righteousness of these people, the way in which they feel that they are untouchable, and until quite recently, they were quite literally untouchable. The police were not touching them. They were allowed to disrupt, and it's all done under this kind of banner of the situation is so bad that we have a right almost to do this. But on one, in one tweet I remember seeing from them, they said, what do you expect us to do? Wait until the next election? And which you say, well, yes, actually, join the club. We're in a democracy. But I think to do something at someone's wedding, shows a lack of self-awareness. And to be gleeful about it, I think it's kind of sociopathic behaviour, actually.
I have to say, showering somebody with orange confetti, I mean, it happens at every other wedding in Belfast. I mean, I don't know what
for these reasons.
I don't know what Thea Rogers must have thought about it. But look,
It's usually invited, though, isn't it?
it's usually demanded, if you don't mind. Yeah, but look, this is appalling. I honestly think that they have absolutely jumped the shark on this one. Now, they've actually lost the case, they've lost the plot, they've lost the argument, and they've lost the sympathy and support of the country. And where they keep banging on about what the suffragettes did in 1915, you know, I don't see many of them throwing themselves under the king's horses, to be
Also,
perfect.
what's quite amusing is that they've actually managed to create a level of sympathy for George Osborne.
Yes.
Well, I never thought I'd see that.
Yes, I'm sort of sympathetic to them. There's nothing, it seems to me, that there are other things I believe afoot, you know, that they're going to disrupt. What I think is emerging, which I think is quite important, is the real class element to this. These are mostly middle-class people, upper-middle-class people.
Retired head teachers.
Exactly, and the utopians, and therefore, you know, there was a picture during the week of a guy at Wimbledon, one of them at Wimbledon, sitting, you know, on the lawn at Wimbledon.
The sense of entitlement was tangible.
Shocking entitlement and smugness.
Yeah.
And the people who are being disrupted on the whole are people trying to get to work and all the rest of it. What has been terrible about this, I think, Stephen, is the way in which the police have basically, they pick and choose which causes they kind of police now. And, you know, for too long, they were on the street saying, "Are you OK? Would you like some water?" to these people. And yet, you know, if, for example, you were anti-lockdown, you really got the full force of the law on you.
What is terrifying is my sister lives very close to Silverstone, and
Yes.
I spoke to her earlier this morning. The police are actually stopping people. She was pushing a grandchild in the pram, and the police are stopping people all around Silverstone. All I have to say is, I don't know about these Just Oil protesters. If they're going to try to get in front of a Formula One racing car, I mean, fair play. I'd like to see the film of that.
But we're going to talk about this a little bit later because Lewis Hamilton came out in support of Just Stop Oil, even though his whole garb is absolutely covered in petrol
It'd be quite difficult to run his jam jar without it.
We've come to the point in a society where you can, as long as you say the right thing, Peter, that's all that matters.
Pure cognitive dissonance, isn't it? I mean, sort of, I think maybe he's not very bright. I don't know. But it wouldn't occur to you, say, I better not say that because I've got all these sponsors all over my body.
It doesn't matter in this world we live in. It's all about what you say. We're going to be discussing that right at the top of the next hour, so stay tuned.
That's a very, very perceptive comment. It actually deserves an hour's debate on its own.
I think it does indeed, yes. We are very clever on this panel on GB News Sunday.
Two of you are.
This is GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Shh, Stephen. Still to come in the next hour. Why are schools excluding white pupils from extra weekend classes? Yes, you heard that right. I'll have the details. But first, let's take a look at the weather with Greg.
The temperature's rising.
I can hear all the feedback in my ear.
Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, further showers and longer spells of rain over the next few days. There will be some sunshine though, but for many of us it will feel fresher. And the reason for this is this area of low pressure. It's been around over the last few days, just sat to the west of us, but over the coming few days it actually spreads towards us and increases the risk of showers and longer spells of rain even more. This evening we do have thundery showers across the UK, but they will start to fade away, and then most places overnight we'll see clear skies, though towards the early hours we could see some showers moving back into southwestern parts of the UK. Temperatures generally the low to mid-teens, so a little fresher than recent nights, but still quite warm for the time of year. Monday morning gets off to a dry start for many, plenty of sunny spells, though the cloud quickly thickens from the southwest. This area of rain pushes north-eastwards through the day, turning heavy at times, particularly across Wales into the Midlands, northwest England too. Elsewhere we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers, and the best of the sunshine towards the southeast. We could see highs around 24 or 25 Celsius. Elsewhere generally the high teens to low 20s. That area of rain across North Wales, northern England, continues to push further north as we head through the evening, and then further spells of rain push into southern parts of the UK as we move into the early hours. This could be heavy at times, so overnight a lot of cloud around outbreaks of rain, and that will keep temperatures up generally a little higher, 14 to 17 degrees across much of the country. So it means a cloudy, wet start for many Tuesday morning. Heavy showers already, but it should brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon. But that will trigger a few heavy showers too. Over the next few days, it remains unsettled as that low pressure stays in charge. Further showers and longer spells of rain and temperatures around average.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you, Greg. So we've got lots more coming up. There are fears Just Stop Oil will target the British Grand Prix today, so could protesters slip past security once again? They seem to have disrupted every major sport event. All of that, we've got more to come. I'm Emily Carver and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Thank you for joining us this lunchtime. I'm Emily Carver. It is 2 o'clock. For the next hour, I'll be keeping you company on TV, online and radio. So coming up this hour, Silverstone security is on high alert amid fears the Grand Prix is the next target for Just Stop Oil. So could protesters slip past security yet again? Then, elocution. Keir Starmer says the best way to shatter the class ceiling is to give children speaking lessons. But is this just barefaced classism, or is it actually a good idea from the leader of the opposition? Then, a return of racial segregation. Why on earth are schools excluding white pupils from extra weekend classes. We'll get stuck into that. Please do get in touch throughout the show. Send us your thoughts on gbviews@gbnews.com. Tweet us at gbnews. But first, let's get the news headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Emily. The Culture Secretary says she's been assured by the BBC that allegations against a presenter are being investigated swiftly and sensitively. Lucy Fraser, who spoke to Director General Tim Davie, says the corporation must now be given the space to establish the facts and take appropriate action. A man's been accused of paying a teenager tens of thousands of pounds for explicit images, with the young person's mother telling the Sun she saw a photo of him in his underwear on her child's phone. While former Conservative Party leader Sir Ian Duncan-Smith says the case has not been handled properly by the BBC.
Yeah, I don't quite know what they're doing. It's in a mess, clearly. If you read the newspaper reports, you can see that the BBC has tried to play this down from the beginning, and it's not worked because it's exploded. They don't have any plan. Any inquiries that are taking place seem to be a mess, and that's led to a whole series of reputational damage across the newspapers to the BBC. The BBC should act like everybody else does, immediately suspend somebody pending the investigation,
yes.
And that way it's clear, and then they can get on with it. At this stage, try and do it quietly and behind the scenes. It never works because somebody's blown the gaff and they're in trouble over it.
More than 1,000 people have crossed the Channel on small boats over the past 2 days. The Home Office says over 600 people were intercepted on Friday and almost 400 made the journey yesterday. Well, despite storm warnings, conditions are calm, and GB News understands that more than 200 people have already been intercepted just this morning. That brings this year's total to 12,700. The Home Office says the number of people risking their lives is unacceptable. Britain is preparing to host the US president, who's due to arrive this evening. Joe Biden will meet the King at Windsor Castle tomorrow. He'll then hold talks with the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, where he's expected to raise concerns over Brexit. America's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine could also be discussed. Well, Joe Biden's visit comes ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania, where the Prime Minister will urge allies to bolster their defence spending. Speaking in Vilnius on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak is expected to say that we're seeing unprecedented security challenges. The UK remains one of the few NATO members meeting the alliance's requirement to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. More than 700 firearms have been seized in the UK by the National Crime Agency. Forces have been working with police in Spain to stop guns, which can be easily converted, from entering the UK. In 11 cases, firearms were sent to people with mental health issues, and 7 involved people with extremist views. The NCA says 74 people have been arrested, resulting in 50 convictions over the past 5 years. The Chancellor is set to outline so-called evolutionary pension reforms to boost economic growth. Jeremy Hunt plans to make changes to pension funds, encouraging investors to support fast-growing businesses. Well, in a speech tomorrow, he's expected to say the changes will be gradual, not drastic. The government says the aim is to help savers, pension schemes and the UK. Concerns have been raised about the thousands of displaced Ukrainians who are still in temporary accommodation in Scotland. The Liberal Democrats say more than 3,000 Ukrainians are still in hotels and around 700 are on board the MS Victoria cruise ship. The party says the progress has been slow and it criticised the lack of resources. The government says it's working on longer-term housing. And the Met Office is warning of more heavy showers and thunderstorms. It comes after rain and storms disrupted major sporting events like Wimbledon and the Ashes yesterday. The Met Office is predicting prolonged heavy rain in Scotland, while Northern Ireland will face strong winds, hail and even potential flooding as well. Heavy showers are also expected to hit Wales, the Midlands and the southwest of England. SSGB News will bring you more as it happens. Now though, back to Emily.
Thank you, Rory. So, yes, security is on high alert at Silverstone today amid fears the British Grand Prix will be targeted by, guess who? Just Stop Oil. Police are using live facial recognition among a raft of measures in a bid to stop climate activists who sat down on the Wellington Straight during the opening lap of last year's race. But with Just Stop Oil managing to disrupt the snooker championships, the Ashes, Wimbledon and even George Osborne's wedding, could they slip past security again? Well, joining me now is GB News national reporter Theo Giacomo, who is there at the circuit. Theo, so what preparations have been made in order to avoid, well, another Just Stop Oil stampeding onto the track, I guess?
Yeah, that's right. Well, some of those things you have just mentioned, that's something Northamptonshire Police say they are looking out for. Just a few moments ago, speaking to some officers who are on dirt bikes, they've been going around this area since the early hours of this morning, and they'll be doing that for the rest of the day. And Northamptonshire Police say officers will be around 8 miles circulating the racetrack and the edge of it, so that people who aren't going through the main entrance won't be able to get in and cause disruption. As you mentioned, we've seen some disruption this week already at Wimbledon and at George Osborne's wedding, the former Chancellor. But this afternoon, we understand from Just Stop Oil in a statement, they have distanced themselves from that, saying it's usual to see people throw confetti, but they are distancing themselves from that. Today, though, 140,000 fans have made their way into Silverstone to see the British Grand Prix, which is taking off in just less than an hour or so. Many fans who have travelled from across the country and the world as well, but they'll be looking forward to this afternoon and hoping there's no disruption. For the first time today, though, Face ID will be used to look out for people, tight security, extra checks before people get in. So they are really clamping down on this, and hopefully many fans will be hoping that there's no disruption this afternoon when the race begins just after 3 o'clock.
Thank you very much indeed, Theo Giacomo there at Silverstone outside the circuit, bringing us the latest on, well, potentially Just Stop Oil might decide to disrupt the race, which I imagine they would love to do, seeing as they've disrupted many, many other types of races, haven't they? And also the F1 before. Now, with me, my panel, Peter Whittle and Stephen Pound, to discuss this. Who should I start with? Peter.
Yes.
Just Stop Oil.
Just Stop Oil. Well, please just stop. I mean, frankly, they are the most, high morally righteous people. They've got away with an enormous amount. We saw what happened at George Osborne's wedding, which is a small thing, I know, in and of itself, but it shows the kind of way in which they look at these things. But the number of people, ordinary working people, who are simply stopped from going about their business, going to work or whatever, by these overprivileged middle-class, upper-middle-class people who think somehow they've got the God-given right, actually, to disrupt our lives. It will go on unless the police really crack down.
But, Peter, at least this is consistent with their message, disrupting the Formula One, because, of course, gas-guzzling cars. Whereas I don't know why they went and spoilt the Glyndebourne Opera.
Well, I mean, that speaks volumes, actually. The fact is these people would know about Glyndebourne, the opera, which I go to.
Well, they just happen to be there, I think.
Yes, exactly. And, the fact is they're not being consistent in any other way. It just so happens to be racing.
No.
I mean...
They just want to spoil everyone's fun. They think they're so high and mighty. They have moral superiority complex, don't they? And also, I think, for some of the more... I don't mean to be ageist, but maybe for some of the middle-aged people who indulge in this kind of... these kind of acts, these kind of protests. Is this like a rebellion later on in life? Perhaps they didn't rebel as youths.
Well,
so now it's like, let's have a bit of fun.
People who can afford to live on the top of the hill often think they occupy the high moral ground.
Yes.
I think in this particular case, what amazes me about this is why, in the name of all that's holy, would anybody want to go and watch something which is essentially Scalextrics on steroids? People whizzing round and round. What is there to watch in Formula One racing?
People
I just
love
don't
it,
understand.
Stephen.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, call me extremely old-fashioned.
Yeah.
When it was at Brooklands or something like that, where you had Surtees and Sterling Moss and people with those helmets and their goggles racing around, it was man and machine.
Well, Stephen, that's not the point, is it really? Whether
No,
people enjoy the F1 or not.
We
People
all agree that these particular JSO people, they're a bunch of self-indulgent people.
Watch
The
it.
problem is that sooner or later, I mean, the point's been made, I know, before, but sooner or later, someone is going to die as a result of this.
Well, yes.
It's not going to be an Emily Wilding-Davidson.
And we saw how
throwing
dangerous-
yourself under Lewis
How
Hamilton.
dangerous it was. Was it Aintree or Cheltenham or one of the,
No, it was
the
at the
horse
Grand
racing
National, the
events?
Grand
The Grand
National,
National too,
Aintree, yeah.
where they, well, essentially could have put people's lives at risk, the jockeys, but also the horses, who they say they wish to protect, although I think that might have been animal rebellion. It's hard to keep track of all the spin-offs of these environmental activist group. But, Peter, I'm interested to get your view on Lewis Hamilton himself. He is, of course, racing today, but he's come out almost in support of Just Stop Oil, at least in terms of their goals, and there's a little bit of an irony there.
Oh, irony, yes. It's schizophrenic, actually, is what it is. But the thing is, as you pointed out earlier, actually, I mean, the point is you can actually, it doesn't matter what your actions are anymore or your behaviour, so long as you say the right thing. And I would have thought he's thinking, I've got to keep my sponsors kind of happy. They probably, yeah, sure, go ahead and do it, because some of your fans will obviously go along with this message. But I mean, frankly, it's beyond parody. It's actually beyond parody that he said. He's covered in all these...
It is. There he is on this our screen for those listening at home. He is, well, he's adorned with petrol and gas-related sponsors over his kit, over his uniform for the races. He clearly can't put two and two together. Of course, Lewis Hamilton has also been in the press in recent years over his... Well, he likes to use the benefits of tax havens.
Indeed, to put it... But what's terrible is virtue signalling has now replaced virtue. And, the virtue signalling didn't exist a few years ago. And there's now people say, it doesn't matter what I am or what I do or what my actions are, it's as long as I say the right thing.
Exactly.
And thank heavens for GB News.
Well, it's exactly what people despise, loathe, don't like with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry, isn't it? It's the assumption that as long as I say that I love the environment, I want to protect the environment, as long as I say I'm an anti-racist, that's all that matters. It's not actually your actions. You can still fly around the world in a private jet and, make vacuous podcasts about yourself, but as long as you say you're a good person, you are a good person,
Yes,
Peter.
but it's what represents a good person now. That's the point, is that the idea that a celebrity, whether it's sporting, film or Meghan Markle, the idea that they would deviate or say something different than something about the environment, which we're seeing, or about gender, or about racial issues, right? Those are the three that essentially, those are the benchmarks. You are a good person if you say the right thing about these three things. When was the last time you heard any actor or any sort of pop singer or sports person say anything outside of those very narrow parameters?
Lawrence Fox.
Well, the thing is...
Apart from... And look what he paid for it.
Lawrence then paid for it, of course. But you've got people who are outliers, like J.K. Rowling, who arguably is too big to cancel. She's obviously come out when it comes to gender-critical views, believing that you can't just say you're a man, say you're a woman, well, you're not a woman because you say you are, essentially. And also you've got Sharon Davies, of course, who has said this, but it's very much a minority. And if you want your sponsor collaborations with, your Nikes and your, I don't know, makeup brands or whatever, you're going to find it very difficult if you have a controversial view. And that is why GB News exists, to have these discussions with people from all sides of the argument, Stephen. And that is why I love working here, Stephen.
Is that right? Yeah, but I read in the paper this week that, one of your advertisers has got all sniffy and huffy and said they don't want to advertise because they've got this backlash against it, which obviously has immediately engendered a backlash on my part to actually stop buying from that particular premise immediately.
I think
I think what really worries me about virtue signalling is an excuse, it's a substitute for analysis and thought. Because if you simply say, I am this, I am that, you're not thinking it through. You're never actually confronting the real issues. And you're going to end up with a whole bunch of robots sitting there parroting the same vacuous nonsense. Where's the debate? Where's the discussion? Where's the oracy?
Well, where is the oracy? We're going to be talking about Keir Starmer and his oracy lessons later on in the show. But let's see what you at home are saying about these Just Stop Oil stunts, or potential for more Just Stop Oil stunts. Lex says, all these stunts are doing is turning opinion against them. There is a saying, you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. That is a very nice saying indeed. I hope it's true for all our benefits. But I think there's also the view at home, and I've seen this in the inbox coming in, people saying, why are you talking about them? Why are you bringing attention to them? If they just, if we just never reported on this stuff, they'd cease to do it. But unfortunately, we don't know if that is true, because we will always report the news. But hey, there probably is a little bit of truth to that. It wouldn't be so fun for them if they got no media attention, perhaps. Sarah on Just Stop Oil ruining George Osborne's wedding says, was this confetti biodegradable? What? Is it now considered littering under the law? Well, Sarah, it may well be. Well, it may well be. I wonder if she must have committed a crime, actually, by interrupting a wedding like that, or perhaps she has, we don't know, we shall see. But it's just nasty behaviour, really. Although some people have said, it's not that big a deal, you just throw a bit of confetti on someone, everyone throws confettis at wedding. But if you are an intruder, then it's not so nice, is it? And Karen says, I think it's disgusting what happened at that wedding. Just Stop Oil have now crossed the line. I will now be going out of my way to use more oil and gas. And I'm sure lots of other people will feel the same. Well, you might want to be careful with your energy bills, but I understand your sentiment. It's like when people tell you that you shouldn't eat meat and you shouldn't eat dairy products. It makes you want to go out and, I don't know, stuff your trolley full of steaks. But anyway, please do keep your views coming in. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. We've got lots more coming up on today's show, but first, let's take a quick look at the weather with Greg.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, further showers and longer spells of rain over the next few days. There will be some sunshine though, but for many of us it will feel fresher. And the reason for this is this area of low pressure. It's been around over the last few days, just sat to the west of us, but over the coming few days it actually spreads towards us and increases the risk of showers and longer spells of rain even more. This evening we do have thundery showers across the UK, but they will start to fade away, and then most places overnight we'll see clear skies, though towards the early hours we could see some showers moving back into southwestern parts of the UK. Temperatures generally the low to mid-teens, so a little fresher than recent nights, but still quite warm for the time of year. Monday morning gets off to a dry start for many, plenty of sunny spells, though the cloud quickly thickens from the southwest. This area of rain pushes north-eastwards through the day, turning heavy at times, particularly across Wales, into the Midlands, northwest England too. Elsewhere we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers, and the best of the sunshine towards the southeast. We could see highs around 24 or 25 Celsius. Elsewhere generally the high teens to low 20s. That area of rain across North Wales, northern England, continues to push further north as we head through the evening, and then further spells of rain push into southern parts of the UK as we move into the early hours. This could be heavy at times, so overnight a lot of cloud around outbreaks of rain, and that will keep temperatures up generally a little higher, 14 to 17 degrees across much of the country. So it means a cloudy, wet start for many Tuesday morning. Heavy showers already, but it should brighten up as we move through the morning into the afternoon. But that will trigger a few heavy showers too. Over the next few days it remains unsettled as that low pressure stays in charge. Further showers and longer spells of rain and temperatures around average.
A brighter outlook with Boxed Solar. Proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Greg. So we've got lots more coming up on today's show. Elocution lessons. Keir Starmer seems to think they're the key to breaking down class barriers. But will his new plans really give disadvantaged students the edge? We've got all of that to come and more. I'm Emily Carver and you're watching and listening to GB News, Britain's news channel. Welcome back. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and radio. So, Keir Starmer, the latest policy from Labour. Elocution lessons in order to further break down class barriers. So Keir Starmer has said the best way of shattering the class ceiling, not the glass ceiling, the class ceiling, is by ending the divide between academic and vocational education. He says, the ability to speak well and express yourself should be something that every child is entitled to and every child should master. He also said that confident speaking gives you a steely core, which I think Keir Starmer probably needs, the amount of time he spends balancing on the fence. Stephen, I've got with me here, and Peter Whittle, of course.
I must admit,
what do you make of that?
Morrissey's, and I thought Morrissey was the lead singer of the Smiths, to be perfectly honest, when I first heard about it. But he's actually got a point. Getting back to the BBC, they used to have a thing in this country called received pronunciation. So, hello, this is the BBC, and we're all living in Godalming, thank you very much indeed. You know, and that was the idea, is that people like Noel Coward, who was a lad from Catford, ends up talking this, you know, with this beautiful accent. A lot of people felt that was important, but I don't think this is actually just about class accent.
No, it's not.
The three of us have all got pretty classless accents. I think what this is about is the ability to actually express yourself in a world of Twitter and tweeting and everything, and that is important because communication, the most important communication, is eye to eye and mouth to ear.
Interesting you say that, and I don't wish to be overly cynical, but I did read a very interesting tweet and article by Joanna Williams, who is often on this channel as a contributor. She wrote, it's all well and good children being able to express themselves, but they have to have something worth saying.
No, I think that's a very good point. And I think what she might have been referring to is that when they have debates, for example, if they do have it as part of this new programme, which I think is actually a good thing in a way, if they have debates, they've got to be able to disagree. I mean, the whole way our culture has gone now in education is that actually what you're allowed to disagree about is very, very narrow. In fact, everyone has safe spaces and all of that. So there has got to obviously be something to, some serious consideration given to that. On the broader point, I find it interesting coming from Keir Starmer. First of all, a Tory leader, for example, could not put this forward without being accused of all sorts of terrible elitism and all of that. But the fact is, it is broadly the educational policies that have been followed over 40, 50 years now, which more or less downgraded everything, such as literacy, you know, basically it doesn't matter if your grammar is wrong. You know, anyone who's ever tried to take anyone on for a job knows this to be true now. It's extraordinary, the mistakes that you see. And kids have been incredibly let down by this because the general sort of motive behind it was, these things are elitist. It doesn't matter. It doesn't... My goodness, it matters. It matters hugely.
We should be elitist, I think. Any good country must have... you know, must strive for an element of elitism.
We used to have a thing on Friday mornings in Parliament called the Youth Parliament, and we actually bring people in to actually have, as a youth parliament, their debate. And afterwards, the MPs are supposed to speak to people and say, gosh, you're absolutely wonderful, weren't you marvellous, you're so super, Demosthenes, thou shouldst be living at this hour. And I actually had to... I said, listen, I'll be completely honest with you. You all read little snippets out of a piece of paper. You didn't put any thought into it. You put no... And they said, that's what you lot do. And I thought, my Lord, it's the example of parliamentarians, you know, who sit there. When I first came into Parliament, if you dared to read from a piece of paper, they say, reading. Nowadays, it's all this little pre-digested
tablets. It's true, it shouldn't be. You shouldn't be allowed to stand up and speak unless you can do it without your notes, in my view. I think in the Parliament, that is something that we need from our politicians. We can't have them pre-rehearsed. They've got their little researcher writing it all for them. I don't think that's good. But it's interesting that you say, you know, talking about the calibre of our politicians and how they have oracy, because Keir Starmer, I don't know if we've got a clip of this, perhaps we can play it in a moment, but Keir Starmer, he was on stage giving this speech. Two little protesters, teenage protesters, interrupted him, there it is on our screen there, interrupted him very, very gently. very gently with a banner about, Green New Deal and something about eco-activism. And he wasn't very well able to deal with it, was he, Stephen? He's not a great expert of oracy himself.
Well, I think he was slightly thrown off his stride there. But I was at a meeting.
He shouldn't have been.
No, but I was at a meeting with Tony Blair once, and Tony Blair was speaking, and this woman stood up, and for 12 minutes she absolutely excoriated this great list of everything he'd done wrong and all the shocking things. And Blair sat back. He said, well, where I do agree with you is. And I think that's the difference. Blair had that skill and ability.
The problem is that there is this kind of great get-out calls now where you can say, oh, it's all down to tweeting and social media, the lack of being able to communicate. It's not, actually. I mean, the fact is, one of the reasons that social mobility has stopped in this country, which it more or less has, is that people in private schools, prestigious schools, still do learn this stuff, right? And then basically people in state schools, it's, oh, don't worry, you don't have to compete, don't worry, we all know what you mean, it's elitist, blah, blah, blah. Huge disservice to these kids.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is that generally...
well, do you think it's a bigotry of low expectations when it comes in our schools?
Exactly it is, and it's coming right through in all of society. You see the results of it now. I mean, people cannot actually communicate. It's not a question. No one's saying you've got to speak like the late Queen. No one is sort of saying that you should make parliamentary speeches. Just simple communication on a day-to-day, written on a day-to-day level, and in terms of vocally, that is absolutely important. It does, Emily, come down, I think, as well, from not just the anti-elitism in education, but also, for example, the way in which we got rid of grammar schools. So, for example, kids from poorer backgrounds, went to grammar school, they rose through the ranks, and grammar schools were always very good on that stuff.
Yeah, that is true. That is a very good point indeed. Now, I will tell you about what happened when this oracy plan was tried out in one school, but I'll let you know that in just one moment. You're watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Still ahead, 4 in 10 voters believe Sir Keir Starmer plans to take Britain back into the EU. I'll be asking, can a leopard ever change its spots? But first, it's the news with Rory.
Thank you very much, Emily. The Culture Secretary says she's been assured by the BBC that allegations against a presenter are being investigated swiftly and sensitively. Lucy Fraser, who spoke to Director General Tim Davie, says the corporation must now be given the space to establish the facts and take appropriate action. A man's been accused of paying a teenager tens of thousands of pounds for explicit images, with the young person's mother telling the Sun she saw a photo of him in his underwear on her child's phone. More than 1,000 people have crossed the Channel on small boats over the past 2 days. The Home Office says over 600 people were intercepted on Friday and almost 400 made the journey yesterday. Well, despite storm warnings, conditions are calm, and GB News understands more than 200 people have already been intercepted just this morning. That brings this year's total to 12,700. The Home Office says the number of people risking their lives is unacceptable. Britain is preparing to host the US president, who's due to arrive this evening. Joe Biden will meet the King at Windsor Castle tomorrow. He'll then hold talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, where he is expected to raise concerns over Brexit. America's decision to send cluster munitions to Ukraine could also be discussed. Well, Joe Biden's visit comes ahead of the NATO summit in Lithuania, where the Prime Minister will urge allies to bolster their defence spending. Speaking in Vilnius on Tuesday, Rishi Sunak is expected to say that we're seeing unprecedented security challenges. The UK remains one of the few NATO members meeting the alliance's requirement to spend at least 2% of national income on defence. That's the latest, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Welcome back to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver, on your TV, online and digital radio. Now, before the break, we were discussing Labour's oracy plans for oracy lessons throughout the curriculum. Now, I must say that I'm not against children learning how to speak properly, being able to express arguments coherently and being able to do so. But I will just say that this is not a new idea, and actually it's being pioneered by a former Blair advisor, I believe, who is now working for Keir Starmer. And it was actually, yes, Hyman, I think it is, Paul Hyman. He was, it was tried out in a school, and apparently it went from outstanding to requires improvement because essentially they were focusing too much on the speaking and not enough on actual content and knowledge, which is possibly more important. As I said, if you're going to express yourself, you need to have something to back it up. You need to have some knowledge, and apparently there were worryingly big gaps in their knowledge. So these things have to be balanced out. So I think, you know, perhaps Keir Starmer should avoid tinkering too much when it comes to this kind of thing. Leave it to the teachers to decide. But that's just my view. Anyway, moving on. A new poll has revealed 4 in 10 voters believe Keir Starmer's Labour intends to reverse Brexit and rejoin the EU. A Redfield and Wilton Strategies survey found 41% of voters still think that Labour policy is to take Britain back inside the bloc. Such a move is sure to shatter the fragile coalition the party is hoping to construct in order to beat Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives in the next general election. Well, maybe. We shall see. I can now speak with former Labour Party spokesman James Matthewson on this. James, do you think it's a good thing that the electorate believe the Labour Party wants to rejoin the European Union?
No, of course it's not a good thing. The problem is that I don't think there's any risk of this at all. I think people in the Labour Party who I've spoken to and people in the leader's office and the like are getting quite frustrated by this now. And it's showing because, you know, they don't believe that there's any risk of it happening. And they want to put the conversation to bed once and for all. And it keeps being brought up. And obviously, the more that it's talked about, the more people who have the concern that it would happen. And the more people who, you know, as you say, in that coalition that Labour have managed to bring together, need to be able to bring together to win power, are going to start having doubts. So it's hugely concerning for the party.
It's interesting, though, James, because there are a lot of people in this country who would ideally like to see Britain return to the European Union. So perhaps if he can try, and this seems to be Keir Starmer's tactic, try to sort of keep everyone happy by sort of some people thinking that, yes, Labour would rejoin the EU, others think, no, they're not going to. Perhaps a coalition could be built by just being vague.
Well, I mean, you've hit the nail on the head there, really, with how to be Prime Minister, haven't you, Emily? Because, you know, trying to walk both roads and keep everybody happy is kind of central to the job and trying to get power because, you know, you're never going to win off pleasing one
That's
group
so
of people alone.
depressing, though, James. That's so depressing because it means we never know what our politicians are actually going to do when they get into power.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it requires trust, doesn't it? This is central to this discussion, really, is whether you have trust in Keir Starmer and whether people can have trust in the Labour Party. Keir Starmer's one man at the end of the day. He's surrounded by, you know, strong Labour figures who've been in the movement longer than him in some cases. So, you know, it's going to require people to put their trust in somebody else, which after the past, 13 to 15 years, you know, it's going to take a lot of doing for people to trust any politicians.
And just very lastly, if you were advising Keir Starmer, would you suggest he just spoke as little as possible about the big B word?
There's a balance, isn't there? Because people know if you're trying to ignore something entirely. You know, people see through it. So you've got to be able to address it, but do so in the right way. Give those reassurances that it's done, it's dusted, but Labour will seek to repair some of the damage of the negative aspects of Brexit, but he needs to be very, very careful with his language on that because we're just starting to see improvement in those red wall seats, which I believe will win back. But he could change that with a few words. So, yeah, my advice to Keir Starmer would be talk less about it, but not at all. I mean, not.
Well,
at all.
I'm not sure if he could possibly talk less about it, but there you go. Thank you very much indeed. Advice from James Mathewson, a former Labour Party spokesman there. Thank you very much. I enjoyed that. Listening here with me in the studio is Peter Whittle and Stephen Pound. Peter, do you think that, well, we've seen in the polls the Conservatives are very much getting a kicking, so Labour could get to power through no great enthusiasm from the electorate, but simply because they aren't the Tories. Do you think that sort of avoiding the rejoin the EU question, avoiding the Brexit question is probably the best bet?
Well, probably. I can't see that it will do any good particularly for him. I mean, you know, not really. As you said, I mean, they're so far ahead that actually I wouldn't have thought there's any need to start...
Talk about anything.
Yeah, well,
Don't frighten the horses.
Yes, almost to that point. And also, you know, basically they're just simply going along like they always have, which is basically trying to, you know, ride two horses, stay on the fence. Very, very difficult and very, very violent manoeuvre, that. But anyway... that's what they're doing, and that's what he's continuing to do.
But you know what? I find it so frustrating, though, just as a, you know, as a layman watching the political parties. I find it so frustrating because we know that Keir Starmer would like to rejoin the European Union if he had his wish, because he campaigned, of course, for a second referendum. We know that he would prefer for Britain to be in the European Union. Whether he wants to rejoin, obviously, I don't know inside his heart.
You can't unmake an omelette. It's as simple as that.
Do you see it as an omelette?
It's something that at the moment you can't turn the clock back on this. You know, the decision's been taken. It took place in June 2016. Job done. You cannot It would be totally undemocratic to try to say, you know, let's have another referendum, because then say, if that doesn't work, we have the best out of three. Insane. Look, the problems of the European Union at the moment are more about keeping Poland and Hungary and other places in the European Union. I think a customs union is a genuine possibility. The problems we face in Northern Ireland with the 300-mile border and the so-called Windsor framework have not been solved. But if we did apply to rejoin the European Union. Do you remember when Sanchez was Prime Minister of Spain? And he said, of course we can come back, as long as we can have Gibraltar. You know, all the other countries, because it would have to be a unanimous decision by every single European country. It ain't going to happen. But I think there's a possibility on cold, hard economic grounds of getting some sort of coming back together in a customs union.
Well, I do think, just lastly, Peter, I do think...
Ain't going to be the euro, though.
I do think even though Keir Starmer says he does not want to rejoin the European Union, it is highly likely that it will be moving in that direction insofar as more alignment with the European Union. We've seen a lot of people argue that the Conservative government haven't got Brexit done as it should be. Do you see that sort of weakening even more?
That is the absolute reason why things have failed so far, is that you have a Conservative Party and an establishment, and let's not forget almost every part of it, who were shocked to their foundations by the result of that referendum. And that's why we're still talking about it.
It was
now.
a slap in the face,
and
yes.
so basically the will has not been there to actually take advantage of any of the huge benefits there could have been from that. I mean, you know, it is quite extraordinary how it has been allowed just simply to wither on the vine.
Well, some people would say, oh, you know, there's been a pandemic and, of course, there was, you know,
Ukraine.
establishment attempts to override the vote, etc., etc. But I do think that, well, the Conservatives are running out of time, aren't they? The clock is ticking. But let's have a look at what you've been saying at home about Just Stop Oil. This is about the potential for Just Stop Oil to disrupt Silverstone today, the Formula One, and, of course, they crashed George Osborne's wedding. Who is this? We've got Ray. He says, I consider that the media are feeding Just Stop Oil by giving them airtime. Oops, sorry, Ray. Morris has written in, he says, why not name these protesters? Have they got solar panels on their roofs? Have they got electric cars on their drives? Is their garden overgrown? Well, this is sort of say as I do, not... Hang on, what's the saying? What's the saying? Stephen, help me out. Say as I do, not what I... No, say what I say. Do what I say.
Do as I say, not as I do.
Do as I say,
not as I do. Do as you would be done by.
Oh, dear. You can see it's getting to the end of the programme. Anyway, we're going to be moving on to a very controversial topic, actually, and it's quite shocking what's happening in some of our schools. White pupils at a school in Haringey, that's a North London borough, have been excluded from extra literacy lessons where the focus will be on teaching Black history and culture. Schools will fund Saturday classes for children from Black heritage families only to accelerate progress in reading and writing whilst also developing the children's knowledge of Black history and culture. Parents were informed that no comparative course will be offered for white pupils or presumably any other ethnic group because, of course, North London is a very diverse area. It's not just black and white kids that will be going to these schools. So I want to get the thoughts of my panel on this one because I'm sure you've got some very strong views. Peter, you often talk on your own channel,
yes,
the New Culture Forum, about the toxicity of identity politics. Do you see this as... well, the logical conclusion of that ideology?
Yes, it absolutely is, or should be. Not the logical conclusion so much as one of the obvious results of it, actually. I don't mean to split hairs there. Look, I mean, the fact is we've got something happening here which is pure racism, right? That is white kids, who, by the way, do the worst in our education system, being excluded from classes, right, as a result, basically, which is what it is, of critical race theory, which is now being taught in schools far more widely than most people realise, right? It's probably illegal what's happening in this school, right? But you can be pretty sure nothing will be done about it, right? This is pure discrimination, pure discrimination. But it's based on a racist idea, which is critical race theory, which is that white people are inherently racist by virtue of being white, right? That is what is being taught in schools, right? Something like 60% of schools have either introduced this to kids or they've used outside bodies, you know, who come in with the materials to teach it. It's just like the gender argument, it's the same thing. All I would say, Emily, is I really wish parents have got to wake up. They've got to wake up about what's happening in our schools, you know? This is just one of the... I think we're going to see a lot more of this.
It's worth saying that this is a council initiative more than the schools per se choosing to do this. It's something that's been offered by the council on behalf of the Haringey Education Partnership. But it's quite extraordinary that any additional extra resources would be given, provided to students based on their ethnicity. I mean, there's so much to say about this. I mean, it's patronising for one thing, that it's only the black kids who need extra support. But what do you make of it, Stephen?
It's also slightly confusing when they say, you know, people of African or African heritage. I mean, you know, where on earth does that end? Look, the other thing that worries me about this actually happened last September. It's only just come out now because some parents have been complaining to Haringey for a long time. And it also costs £400 a time. You know, again, Haringey is not the most wealthy borough in the world, but I think...
They know how to spend money, let me tell you that.
Yeah, OK,
They spent God knows how much changing the road sign, Black Boy Lane, if you remember.
I know.
And the people who lived on Black Boy Lane, I wrote about this at the time, the people on Black Boy Lane didn't want it to change.
I know, and I remember when I was working for Hammersmith Council, they wanted to change the name of the White City Estate, and they did a referendum on the whole estate, and 99% of the people said, no, we want to keep it.
No, thanks.
So, yeah, and these were people, you know, who certainly were of different...
But it's crazy. Things that were never racist or considered racist are now considered racist because they're seen through the lens of critical race theory or whatever you want to call it.
Peter makes a very, very important point. He's made a number of important points. The thing is, if you have a look at under-attainment in the British educational system, working-class white boys come bottom of the panel every single time. So how are you going to feel? Because if you're talking about general educational attainment, that's one thing. But they seem to be talking about black history. Now, where I live in West Ealing, I've lived all my life, it is Irish, Polish communities, and we have, you know, Irish lessons that we have the Irish Centre. We make our own education. The Polish Saturday schools do that. You don't need to have it spoon-fed to you. If you want to cherish your culture, go ahead and do it, but don't expect the state to pay for it. And above all, don't expect to be having that at the disadvantage of somebody else.
It's quite interesting, Peter. I'll come to you in just one second. I just want to put this to you because I think the Telegraph broke this story, or at least reported on it first. A parent with a child at one of these schools said exactly what Stephen is saying. He said, why should black and black heritage children get extra support in reading and writing when it is obvious to anyone with access to the internet that it is white boys who are doing worst academically and are being left behind, and this has been going on for many years. Here's an idea. Why not use these resources to help any child, no matter the colour of their skin, who needs help? How old-fashioned.
Yes, I know. But the thing is that I would say one of the reasons that young white boys have fallen behind, indeed, are the least likely to go to university, so much for white privilege, right, Lisa, is indeed because of the general drift of educational policy, which is to constantly, even subconsciously, make them the villains of the piece. I mean, you know, we know that with critical race theory, who is the bogeyman? It is the straight white man, right? They're quite clear about this. And that essentially, as I said, by virtue of your whiteness, this makes you racist, right? Which, of course, is ultimately, as I say again, the most racist thing. But the fact is that what worries me, I think, was far more important than that, is that this is happening in our schools. So you're having kids coming out with all of this in their head, just like with gender theory too. Parents, I really appeal to parents to look and see who is providing the materials for these classes, and then you've got to demand to be able to see it, because that's the other thing. Quite often,
behind them.
schools will actually, they will say, oh, no, we can't, because of commercial reasons, we can't show you and all of this. You've just got to keep on going and find out who's indoctrinating your kids.
Well, it's like with the sex education, the tools that were being used in the workshops that were being used in schools,
mermaids.
parents haven't always been able to actually view the materials that their children are being taught on very contentious issues. And I think this all stems, although it was going on before, but it got accelerated after the Black Lives Matter movement accelerated in this country after the death of George Floyd, after the killing of George Floyd. And it seems like it's still, you know, going through our schools,
Well, this
idea.
could be one of the determinants in America, particularly. You cannot imagine the debates that are taking place in America at the present time. But, you know, the more I look at this, the more I'm horrified by it, a particular situation. And I think that we have to actually somehow get beyond this. We have to get through this.
I think absolutely that's right. Now, GB News has reached out for comment. Previously, Councillor Zina Brabazon from Haringey Council has told The Telegraph it has long been recognised in Haringey that there is historic and established attainment gap between black African, black Caribbean pupils and their white British peers.
No, there isn't.
Our schools here in Haringey and the local authority are absolutely determined to collectively do something about those statistics. Our teaching staff go to great lengths to ensure that all children and young people, irrespective of their race or background, receive the very best education possible. I'll let you assess that at home. I'll let you decide what you make of that particular comment. But you've been getting in touch on our big topic of the day. Well, one of our big topics of the day, Labour's EU leanings. Simon says, when Starmer gets to Downing Street, we will be back in the customs union. Starmer is a human rights lawyer, lives in a castle, doesn't live in a normal street, won't even try to stop the boats. He will probably help them fight any legal case. Ian says, like most politicians, he says what he thinks we want to hear, and if he becomes Prime Minister, he will U-turn and carry out his real socialist and Europhile agenda. And Bella, you've got in touch. You say, don't trust Starmer as far as I can throw him. Well, there you go. Thank you for sending in those views. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter. We're at GB News. That's it from me today, but stay tuned because we have Nana Akua in the studio.
Oh, I was just envying your dress.
It's lovely, isn't it?
In the house.
Really nice, although I might blend in with the background on my background.
It's a Ukrainian flag.
It is. Oh, my God, so we are.
Oh, there you go.
It's true.
On message
Are
or
you saying
what?
we're, you know, virtue signalling in the studio? Of course not.
Well, interestingly enough, we will be talking a little bit about Ukraine and the whole cluster bomb issue, because it's a bit of a terrible type of bomb, and it seems that the Americans are going along with it, but we don't want to do that, so we'll be discussing that. Plus the banks. Why on earth we have adopted the EU legislation, but yet we've adapted it and made it worse for ourselves, and we could actually get rid of the legislation that requires us to... We don't have to have this pet business going on in this country the way it is. So we'll be discussing that.
Sounds
and loads
fantastic.
more.
Sounds very interesting indeed. I'm interested to hear the debate over cluster bombs. Stephen, no, you can't say. You've had so much time to say, but I must now say goodbye to our lovely viewers and listeners. You've been watching and listening to GB News Sunday with me, Emily Carver. Thank you so much for joining me and Stephen and Peter this afternoon, but don't go anywhere. Nana is up next. But before that, let's take a quick look at the weather with Greg.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast. Well, further showers and longer spells of rain over the next few days. There will be some sunshine though, but for many of us it will feel fresher. And the reason for this is this area of low pressure. It's been around over the last few days, just sat to the west of us, but over the coming few days it actually spreads towards us and increases the risk of showers and longer spells of rain even more. This evening we do have thundery showers across the UK, but they will start to fade away, and then most places overnight we'll see clear skies, though towards the early hours we could see some showers moving back into southwestern parts of the UK. Temperatures generally the low to mid-teens, so a little fresher than recent nights, but still quite warm for the time of year. Monday morning gets off to a dry start for many. Plenty of sunny spells, though the cloud quickly thickens from the southwest. This area of rain pushes north-eastwards through the day, turning heavy at times, particularly across Wales into the Midlands, northwest England too. Elsewhere, we'll see a mixture of sunny spells and scattered showers. And the best of the sunshine towards the southeast. We could see highs around 24 or 25 Celsius. Elsewhere, generally the high teens to low 20s. That area of rain across North Wales, northern England, continues to push further north as we head through the evening, and then further spells of rain push into southern parts of the UK as we